My name is Ariel from the Children of Karma, and today I'd like to discuss the discovery chart of Uranus. Um, Uranus was discovered March 13th, 1781 in the town of Bath, UK at 10 p.m. This gives it a Scorpio rising chart. And it's just really interesting here on the midheaven. We have the asteroid Atlantis. Atlantis representing discoveries, hidden wisdom, ancient knowledge. Atlantis was also the asteroid to meet Uranus when it entered Gemini for its long stay in 2026 at the end of April. Atlantis was there to meet with Uranus 245 years later. How poetic. In the Scorpio rising chart, the south node here is conjunct the angles, the ascendant and descendant axis. The north node here conjunct Chiron as well. So it's like the wounding of Uranus could be pulling away from the comfort zone. Maybe even bringing that hidden wisdom, that ancient wisdom, bringing it into the light, as Taurus is where the light is sustained and it's rising. Could also be that Uranus is meant to heal, the wounded healer. Yeah, it can act as a healer. What's interesting too is this Jupiter here in the first house. Jupiter stationed retrograde 17 hours prior to this discovery here. So in a way too, it could be revealing what is hidden, could be reassessing moral philosophies, academic wisdom, spiritual wisdom being reassessed, new information coming in. And Jupiter stations retrograde on the fixed star Toliman. Toliman has this Venus-Jupiter nature, but some also say it has the Sun-Mars nature. I think Venus-Jupiter in the sense that it poses some difficulties with female relationships. But Sun-Mars in the sense that it has a tactical brilliance, a fearlessness, can be overconfident and cruel at times, vindictive. It is the sign of Scorpio. And positions of honor, power, but also can be tied to accidents as well. Accidents is also a Mars Saturn signature, which is interesting because Jupiter is the dispositor for this Mars Saturn conjunction here in the sign of Sagittarius. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, the Sagittarius house, and what's going on here, and also the Pisces house. And if we look at that Pisces house, the sun is there in Pisces. It's also square to this opposition between Uranus and Mars and Saturn. So we have a T-square going on too. And Jupiter is the one that rules both of those houses. So, this is retrograde too. This fixed star is also associated with periods of storm and distress, revolting against the curtailment of freedom. Sounds a lot like Uranus, right? And it does sound like Mars Saturn too. The strong passions and vengeance. It's interesting how we can see, these similar themes play out through multiple aspects of the charts. I think that's where we can feel more certain about the interpretation because we're seeing it in multiple places. If we're looking at the history of when Uranus was discovered, this month, this March of 1781, we were dealing with the American Revolutionary War. And in this time, the Continental Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation. This was the first Constitution of the United States. It was a major step towards the unity for all colonies. And they had developed this weak, decentralized government where states retained most of their power. And so they had a feeling, a sense of independence here. But you know what's interesting? This one didn't last because they couldn't regulate commerce or levy taxes. And Uranus here is found in the eighth house, in the sign of Gemini too, at 24 degrees. The current constitution was adopted in 1789. That's while Uranus was in Leo, a sign dealing with rulership, leadership. There were many battles too at this time too. The skirmish at Waters Creek, the battle at Cape Henry, the battle at Guilford Courthouse. This is where the British forces won, but they faced many casualties. This is very much a Mars Saturn as well. And maybe learning when to use force, when to follow the rules and when to break them. Actions that are more focused on long-term consequences. There was also the Colombian Revolt, the riot of Socorro, and this one started off small too. I think Uranus is like the creep, the one that creeps, and this started off very small. It was like a local grocery store worker was upset with some of the advertisements that were being placed around the neighborhood about raising taxes. He pulls down one of the flyers and all of a sudden it activates everyone else's anger and it builds. It was the first major challenge to the Spanish rule and 20,000 rebels had gathered. It was not successful. But it did pave the way for future revolutionary actions to take place. So it creeps in slowly. We may not see the blessing of Uranus right away, but I think looking at the larger picture, we can see what develops because of just something very small. There were many developments in astronomy at the time. William Herschel discovering Uranus was huge because we thought that the planets had ended at Saturn. Saturn is the furthest one away from the sun for optimism and joy and purpose and light. So Saturn gets all of the opposite of this, all of the darkness, all of the misery, the cold. But I think now with the discovery of the outer planets, this energy gets dispersed amongst these planets. Now Saturn has someone to share the misery with, so to speak. Maybe Saturn now becomes more of a lighter figure because the outer planets can take some of this bad karma here. So even the discovery of Uranus itself is just breaking ceilings. There was the French astronomer Charles Messier. He rediscovers. This is something I noticed too with Uranus. It's a rediscovery of ancient wisdom. That south node on the ascendant. And that Jupiter retrograde in the first house as well. It's like rediscovering something. The French astronomer Charles Messier, he rediscovers the global cluster M92. It was first discovered in 1777 by Johann Elert Bode. And Charles Messier, he also developed a catalog, which is Gemini. Catalog, a list of comets and nebulas. One of these hidden blessings of Uranus, I think. That's sweet. Hidden blessings. I like that. It does bring hidden blessings. Maybe you don't see it right away because it doesn't look the way it should, or the way you've imagined it, but it is a blessing if we're looking in the, at the bird's eye view. I think even discovering Uranus, it now creates parameters around certain discoveries that, there were astronomers seeing objects in the sky, but they didn't quite know how to label them, how to name them, how to categorize them. What language do you give this particular object? And what is the importance? I think the discovery of Uranus now creates these parameters around, well, this is what a planet is. This is what a comet is. This is what a nebula is. It now opens the door for more discovery because of that classification system. Pierre Michel also discovered the dwarf galaxy NGC 5195. So many discoveries here in the field of astronomy. Another kind of sneaky way Uranus came in was through Carl Wilhelm Scheele. At this time, he was working on tungstenite. Um, it's the work done in the shadows. This is the Mars Saturn, and it's also the dispositor in the sign of Scorpio. It's like the work done within the shadows, the dedication that's not seen. It leads to the breakthrough Uranus. It's interesting, he worked on tungstenite during this time, and he isolated this substance into tungstic acid. He was almost there, he went most of the way, but he didn't have the right furnace. If he did, it would have led to the discovery of tungsten, which was later discovered, by someone who did have the right equipment. It's interesting not having the right furnace. This is like Mars Saturn too, being expressed here, not having the right furnace. So you could not make the discovery, the Uranus. So it was discovered later by the French, when they had the proper furnace and they were able to use this tungstic acid and develop tungsten, which was a very hard metal. With a very high melting point. It's dense and durable, and it's used for anything that requires strength under extreme conditions. This is Mars Saturn as well. And it also is used to help improve safety and performance. Mars Saturn. It's also a conductor of electricity. So it's used in manufacturing electrical components. It's used in specialized lighting, high intensity lamps, in semiconductor devices. It's used to produce cutting tools and drill bits and abrasives. Also, when it's mixed with carbon, it becomes one of the hardest materials available. It's used in mining equipment, in aerospace and defense sectors, spacecrafts, ammunition. It's also used in the health sector too, with a shield against radiation in protective gear. Surgical equipment like instruments and implants, particle accelerators and nuclear reactors. This work done in the shadows, this shadow aspect of Uranus is interesting. It made me think, well, then perhaps the square, the square could be where it becomes more visible, that Mars wants to assert itself to be seen as an individual, so it's breaking free. So perhaps, the work done in the shadows is then seen once we hit the square. It's interesting because with smallpox, this is the illness that they were dealing with at this time. Mars and Saturn, that conjunction is typically associated with pandemics and illnesses. At this particular time, they were dealing with smallpox, and the world's first vaccine here wasn't developed until 1796. And this was when Uranus was in the sign of Virgo, a sign of health, but also it's square to the placement that it has here in Gemini. So it's like the work done here, perhaps, is then seen as it squares. The first vaccine developed here, it was developed in 1796, but it was also a rediscovery in itself. The mid 1500s, China used this method of inoculation, grounded up material from the sores, they blew it into the nostril. And in India, they use needles to transfer material from the sores to the skin of healthy children to develop the immunity. It was also known in Europe in 1721. It was brought to the American colonies in 1721. So it was well known. It was just, I think, also highlighting this Mars Saturn. It's like a stubbornness to, like the Uranus wants to enlighten, but this Mars Saturn's pretty stubborn. So, like, I think it can express that. Maybe work done consistently in the shadows, the strong determination, the consistency, not giving up, the perseverance. It leads to results. I like to look at the asteroids that are conjunct Uranus as well. I think it gives it a little bit of a flavor. And I think it's just another place where we can find the themes repeating themselves. So, conjunct Uranus, we have the asteroid Brunhild. This is asteroid 123. It's tied to the Norse Valkyrie Brunhilder. And it's a story about two kings that are arguing. And Odin, who represents the divine order and law, he chooses one of the kings to win. And because Brunhilde is representing this Uranus energy, she chooses the other one. And Odin must punish her. He imprisons her in a mountain crowned with a wall of eternal fire. This is Mars Saturn. And a dragon, Fafnir, who guards the flames. And she must wait here until a man who fears neither death nor God comes to rescue her. And, you know, she's threatening social order with her choice. So Odin feels he must punish her. You know, Odin often uses punishment, suffering to gain wisdom. If you think about how he sacrifices his own eye to obtain knowledge, to drink from the waters of knowledge. He also hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days to learn the runes. So he's used to punishment, being tied to growth, foresight, balance. So to him, it's not really a punishment. And this reflects this Mars Saturn too, a Mars Saturn ideology that actions have consequences. Ultimately, though, Brunhilde, she was deceived. A man did come to save her, but he was wearing a disguise. So the man she thought that was brave enough to cross the flames, he was not the one. I think perhaps Odin was trying to teach her proper discernment, proper timing, maybe impulse control. You know, maybe your opinions would be better received at a different time. Maybe picking and choosing your times, maybe knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them, because things are not always as they appear. It also represents the backroom tactics, Uranus in the 8th house, putting on a disguise, because the man, I think, who wanted Brunhilde didn't have the courage to cross the flames. So he needed someone else braver to do it, to deceive her. That's the problem. It's also shown this backroom tactics with Scorpio ascendants, with this Mars Saturn even moving through the shadows, the Jupiter being the dispositor and its retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. All of it's sort of saying backroom tactics, move a little more covertly. This next asteroid that's conjunct Uranus is Prudentia, asteroid 474. This is the goddess of prudence and self-control. She was one of the 4 cardinal virtues, alongside justice, fortitude, and temperance. She stands for careful judgment and planning, understanding the consequences of one's actions, self-discipline. This sounds a lot like Mars Saturn, right? To navigate life's challenges with a measured approach, thoughtful foresight, social responsibility. Her symbol is also the serpent, you know, symbols of knowledge and transformation. And representing the good and the bad. You know, knowledge can be used for beneficial purposes, or it can be dangerous in the wrong hands. It's like a tool. A tool can be used both positively and negatively. It's really dependent on the character of the person holding and using the tool. Her symbol is also the mirror, which it lends to more self-awareness, reflection, self-reflection. It will lead to more informed decisions. This is also seen through the South Node, Moon, Jupiter, all in the 1st house, and Scorpio too. So it's telling you that you need self-control and knowing when to pick timing and discernment. I think probably the major gifts of Uranus, once you learn how to work with it. There's Hades here also in the first house, conjunct the ascendant and the south node. Um, in Hades, his story, he was one of the children swallowed up by Kronos. He had many siblings. Zeus was not swallowed by Kronos, though. He was saved and to be raised within a cave and with a destiny to save his siblings. So he saves them. And they're parceling off the universe. It's Zeus receives the sky, Poseidon receives the sea, and Hades receives the underworld. He rules over the dead, over funeral rites, um, over the wealth of the earth, because originally he was considered an abundance god, god of wealth, a wealth that's hidden within the earth. So thinking about that, that's precious metals, right? That's tungsten. That's crystals also using to power modern technology. The fertile soil for our nourishment. Hades is the unseen one. Uranus in the eighth house, it's not seen by Hades. Hades is in the first house. The ascendant, it's tied to the ascendant, and it cannot see Uranus from where it is sitting. So that's interesting too. The ancients also rarely used his name. He was like Voldemort. His name held some sort of power, and speaking it might release this invisible power. It's interesting because the moon and Jupiter in the first house, it's like an influence over the masses, holding a dominance in the sign of Scorpio, a power. He rarely left the house, so there weren't many myths about him. He rarely left his home. He wanted to be alone, isolated. So there are a few myths about him. But I think we do begin to see that Chiron in Taurus show itself here, to the willingness to wound others using Venusian tactics. When he captured Persephone, he crafted the most beautiful flower, and she was distracted by it. She had to pick the flower, and then the ground opened up underneath her, and it took her to the underworld. He also decided to share Persephone, back with her mom, Demeter or Ceres. He fed her a pomegranate seed in order to bound her to his kingdom eternally. So using food, using nature to harm another. We can see that with Chiron and Taurus opposing Hades. But he was seen as strict but fair. He treated others according to their deeds in life. He only took 1/3 of the year. When he decided to share Persephone, he took the winter months. Maybe responsible for cuffing season, maybe, perhaps. Hygeia is also conjunct Uranus here. That's interesting. The wounded healer conjunct the north node and the angles, the descendant sign. And Hygeia conjunct Uranus, it's like it wants to heal. Hygeia, her father was Asclepius, the god of medicine. The whole family is tied to different parts, different aspects of health. Asclepius, her father, he even brought people back from the dead. Hygeia in particular, she's preventative medicine. So she's putting in the work, treating illness before it occurs, maintaining good health. Her symbol is also the serpent. So is Hades. There's Hades, Prudentia, Hygeia, and it's tied to the cyclical nature of healing and health. Thinking about the snakes shedding its skin. Even with this Uranus moving covertly, you think about snakes moving, and they don't exert too much energy. they're very, they use their energy wisely. They have to spend their time transforming. To shed that skin, it takes time. And it's not always pretty. It's actually pretty ugly to watch. Um, and it takes some time. And it reminds me of recovery. It's really not a pretty process. And it's filled with ups and downs. You may get better, you may get worse. You may constantly deal in the winter time, for example, you may have certain pain that you may not have in the summer. So every winter, you have to prepare uh, for another change, for another shift. It's interesting because, yeah, that's why I have the snake on my table. Also, a snake, I guess, would be my first pet, even though I was younger than 5, so I don't technically see it as a pet. It was just like this being also lived with me at home. Seeing the snake go through the shedding regularly, even eating the meal and how it contorts its body to digest. Mars is also conjunct fixed star Aculeus. And this is tied to acumen, a sharp mind. It has a moon Mars nature, but it's conjunct a malefic, which is Saturn. And so it can refer to eyesight problems, literal eyesight problems, or could be in terms of clarity, a boundless energy, leadership ability, seeing the bad in everything. Could be maybe an atheist mindset, lifestyle. Can be self-destructive, reckless. This can be a person that's blind to what we see, but they can see what we cannot see. They're courageous, heroic, defiant, dogmatic. Could be thoughtless, inconsiderate, accident prone as well. Goddess of prudence seems like is needed here, opposing this Mars. Self-control. But also it's showing through suffering we find wisdom, which is another, reflects Odin's theory here with Brunhild. And Mars conjunct Saturn as well. Through suffering we find wisdom. That actions have consequences, for God and human. It's interesting when we think about Prometheus as well, too. With his consequences. If we think about that mythology, you can see it in this T-square as well, with this Mars-Saturn conjunction, opposing Uranus, squaring the sun. Prometheus, he steals fire. He steals fire. You can see that in the sun. You can see that in Mars, even a theft of the fire. For humanity, the sun in the sign of Pisces. Even his liver being removed in that story, his liver is removed. This is Jupiter, Sagittarius. The liver trouble, this is Mars, Saturn. So it's even being described here in the chart, symbolically too, detailed. I find that interesting. I think he's the perfect, actually, representation of this Uranus energy. You can see him even in the chart here. If we're looking at the 8th house, it's placed in the 8th house. I find that interesting. The metaphysical, also revelations. They come from a place that we can't see, a mysterious place, but we're somewhat attached to it nonetheless. It can speak through us. The words unlock a sort of understanding, a self-awareness where you can be strategically assertive, to develop perseverance and resiliency. I think this alignment is even showing to build routines with room for innovation, room for experimentation. It can also show with Mars Saturn utilizing exercise to manage impulsive behavior, impulsive thoughts. There could be unstable energy levels too. So, unstable energy levels, I guess that can tie to illness as well. It makes me think of going off script. You know, the Mars Saturn would be very disciplined. Maybe would develop a script, and Uranus would find ways to go off of script. Maybe it's seeing the necessity of a script, but carving out moments where you can break free of the script. Developing patience, prudentia, finding creative expressions as an outlet that helps with Mars Saturn. Structuring your own originality. It should be moments to break free of that system and to be yourself, and moments to follow instruction. So it's a tension between our impulse versus our control. The eighth house is also tied to inheritance, both monetary inheritance, but also psychological inheritance. And maybe to detach and free yourself from this, from patterns and cycles that we have no control over. Maybe finding a level of peace in managing what you can, and maybe finding opportune moments to break free of the pattern. It can show anxiety as well. So, anxiety in the eighth house around attachments and loss. Could be guilt and shame around sexuality as well in this eighth house. It maybe doesn't match the mainstream because it's reflected through Mars as well, the Mars Saturn. Maybe it doesn't match the mainstream, the societal expectations of this particular expression. And it could be inherited too. These sort of patterns that we have, the desires that we have could be inherited as well. They can create subconscious patterns that are cemented before we're even aware of them. It's something I realized too. After my injury, it seemed like all the areas that were wounded were the lower three chakras, this area. It's like the foundation of the body, the spine, the tip of the spine, and the middle of the back. It goes all the way up. Um, and it seemed like I was kind of digging up the foundation, seeing where these things were developed. How did they develop and through what? And do they make sense now with a more adult mindset? Some of these things are just, we're too young to even notice how these certain thought patterns develop through what's within our environment, what an adult might say or do, what we may view through our media that can have long-term effects. It could deal with self-awareness of your own passions, your own desires. Maybe realizing where they come from, it demystifies this. And maybe you realize, well, this is not me. Um, this is more what I was given, what was given to me, you know, the hand that was dealt to me. And this is not me necessarily playing the hand, but maybe the hand playing me. In a sense, you're being moved by what happened to you rather than using it to propel somewhere else. It could be a fear of your passion too, because if we engage in our passions, we could lose control. There's also the T square, right, between Uranus, the Sun, and Saturn. Saturn also tied to Mars. And this Saturn here, this Mars Saturn conjunction is superior to the Sun. So that means it's carrying the agenda of Mars Saturn here, this Sun. And the Sun and Saturn are mainly responsible for ego and its development. So the structure of the personality is now filtered through this collective vision of Uranus, this vision of progress. Um, the person here can choose Saturn, you know, this maybe choosing Saturn instead because it is superior to the sun. It also rules Aquarius as well. It's also tied to Uranus in myth as well too. So perhaps the person can just align more with Saturn, follow the rules, maybe move away from the individual opinion. Because the individual opinion, the subjective, it doesn't help the larger group. It can even threaten the larger group. The system could fall apart. If we think about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, you try to break the system can fight back. The system provides safety. In the 8th house, Uranus can give this subjective voice and turn it into a system of thought, a framework of thoughts, a comprehensible system that could be received more logically, more practically. It's trying to make these mysterious concepts more tangible, more scientific, more clinical. Choosing to do this through the sign of Gemini too, through speech, through learning, inventing words, to explain these mysterious concepts. We see this all the time. We see this both in spiritual and scientific circles. Inventing words. There's Hades, Moon, Jupiter, South Node, Ascendant in Scorpio. So it's about learning to work with our emotions constructively. Could be also someone who works with people who experience intense pain, sadness, loss. This Hades is also the gut instincts, the revelations of Uranus too. Overall, this planet is making me think of ancient wisdom being rediscovered through modern means. There's a strong fighter with Uranus, a perseverance too, with an intention to heal. Looking at the discovery charts of these outer planets, it makes me better understand the purpose. I think you can see things through this charts, things that represent the Uranus energy. And because we don't quite understand these outer planets, I think we should use these charts. They seem very valuable. And there's more, I'm sure, that you can go into here about what this planet means. And it's fascinating too, because this planet had existed. This is the time we see it. But it's still showing itself so strongly in this chart. I think that's fascinating. I wish we had the charts of all of the planets. We could interpret them this way. But yeah, it's interesting to now see Uranus also back in Gemini, 24 degrees. Seeing it a little more clearly here. I'm sure we can go back into all these charts and really look at it and see how Uranus speaks, how Uranus gets dressed, what would Uranus eat? What is the goal of Uranus? How does it feel? Where does it want to go? I think you can learn a lot through the symbolism. It's even speaking to you, throughout the day in different ways. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like the video. Bye.